Hey everybody, welcome to Mat Men, your source for all things professional wrestling. I'm Andrew Zarian. I'm not joined by Rich today. We had a bizarre issue technically with getting our guest on. It's nothing on his side, it's all us. This is one of the few times that I
Well,
can't blame the guest, and I can blame myself. I want to introduce wrestling icon, legendary name. A lot of you guys know it if you grew up, if you're around my age in your 30s or 40s or even younger and you followed WWE, you know the Blue Meanie. Welcome in.
hey, usually I'm the bizarre one, so maybe I'm causing the bizarre problems, but who
You know what?
knows?
We'll
But
go with that. The bizarre
happy to
one.
be here, man. Finally.
I know we met a couple years ago. You were doing a BWO signing at the Wrestling Universe, and
Yeah, in Queens.
Stevie Richards and I have been friends for a number of years. And it's funny, not even from pro wrestling. We became friends through technology because he was doing a bunch of tech podcasts, and we were kind of in the same circle. And we kind of became friends. And I wasn't
Awesome.
even doing a wrestling show. I wasn't involved in the business at that time, other than I did a work shoot with Damien Demento, where
Oh, okay.
he came into my studio and we did a trivia game and he beat me up. And still to this day, I get asked about that all the time. And he painted this amazing portrait of me, and it's hanging in my studio. So that was the only thing I had done in the business. Now I'm involved with Capital Wrestling, and I help run the promotion. I do all the stuff. But you're one of the names that has always fascinated me. And I got to tell you, when you went to WWE and you were doing the Blue Desk character, I was so fascinated by it. I really, it was one of those moments that I got to tell you, those parody gimmicks never really crossed over. And it was one of the first times that you kind of saw it on WWE TV where there was a separate company that was doing a parody of a character that manifested on their TV. But I've always been a fan of yours, and we got to meet, and one of the nicest guys I've met in the business. I wanted to kind of talk about your podcast because you launched one this week. You have a podcast that's launching. I want to talk about that, but before I go into that, I kind of want to get to know what you're doing right now. I mean, this is a bizarre moment for you, right? You've been a wrestling fan for a majority of your life, and there's no WrestleMania. I mean, practically, there's nothing.
We live in weird times. I often joke that we're living the apocalypse right now. But like the wrestling world is on hold, and like you said, I've launched a podcast which we were supposed to do next month, but we're supposed to go into a studio, do everything the right way, and then it just turned out that me and my co-host Josh Chernoff, who does an amazing job, we're sitting there and we're going, man, we're missing out on a lot of stuff right now. There's a lot of stuff that we should be talking about. So we launched a little bit early and we start talking about it, and it's just a weird thing. I mean, there's a WrestleMania. There's not really a WrestleMania. Uh, and like I had said on our debut podcast, WWE's into the whole world of being the first for the first time in
Yeah.
WWE history. You know, why not, you know, postpone WrestleMania and then for the first time ever in WWE history, the night before WrestleMania, SummerSlam. And then you can have a Thursday takeover, you can have a Friday SmackDown, you can have a Saturday SummerSlam, and then the same fans who went to SummerSlam are going to go to WrestleMania. So you could see, and then Monday you would have Monday Night Raw. So I mean, you would still be able to have WrestleMania in front of a crowd, and I mean, it's one thing to psych yourself up for WrestleMania, but this is like we live in a time where we're living in a living documentary right now, to where we're going to hopefully all look back on this and be like, remember that time?
Yeah. Remember that time there was
No matter
nothing?
no matter what company's running,
Yeah.
we're all going to look back and go, man, remember that time? And we're living in history right now. It's crazy.
Listen, this is the first time I haven't gone opening day in many, many years. I live in Queens. I'm a Mets fan growing up. I'm 7 minutes from the park, and there's no baseball happening.
Yeah,
It's
same
wild.
here. Same with myself and the Philadelphia Phillies. I live and die, but I love sports. I love wrestling. I love sports. I love stand-up comedy. There's certain things I love, and I'm so accustomed to. So right now, I should be getting ready for some kind of game, some kind of a sporting event, and my thumbs, and it's like, man, what do I do?
What do you do?
You know, I'm
Yeah.
like, Yeah, what do you do? There's no rule book on this.
No, it's wild. Obviously, before we continue, I want to get a little plug for your podcast. You kicked it off this week. Tell us a little bit about it, and obviously, I want to go into it a little bit more, but just so people could kind of check it out, because I saw you posted it. You did your first one. This is a new venture for you. You're diving headfirst in this, and might as well. I mean, you have a lot of amazing interests that obviously cross over with me. I'm a sports fan. I'm a pro wrestling fan. You have a tremendous amount of stories you could tell on the air. What made you kind of get into the podcasting concept, and what are you hoping to do with this?
Well, I got to the podcasting situation because it hurts a lot less.
Yeah.
But
You mean to tell me
uh,
taking a bump that hurts more than talking into a microphone?
way more, way more. But I tell people all the time, I constantly have a show going on in my head all day, every day. I can host a podcast from leaving my house to walking to my car. There's always thoughts in my head. There's always, me thinking of angles, thinking of promos and stuff like that. And there's a reporter named Wade Keller. We're going over some stories about me, and he's like, "Man, you really are like the Forrest Gump of professional wrestling." When you consider some of the things I've done, some of the places I've been, and given my background. So, Meanie, why don't you write a book? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And I think if I could have an outlet to have a conversation once a week with Josh Chernoff, my co-host, and get these they talk about anything from wrestling, football, baseball, movies, useless knowledge. I'm the king of useless knowledge. I know so many things I could never make a living off of, but hopefully with the hopefully the podcast will relieve some of that pressure that's building up in my head. But seriously, this is never knew how. And and when it comes to picking a host, it's kind of like when you train a wrestler. Whoever you pick to be your host is representative of you. Like when Al Snow trained me, everything I do reflects on Al Snow, good or bad. So I wanted to pick somebody who I have a rapport with, and somebody who I know, won't go on social media and say something, and I go, "Hey man, you got to dial that down," or
Yeah.
you got to ease it up. So I was thinking of, man, who could it be? And one night I was driving home, and I was coming off the highway, and it just popped in my head. I'd been doing a lot of stuff with Josh Chernoff. He's got a show on Fight TV. He's done podcasts with Bill Apter and stuff like that. And anytime he interviews me, we always have a good back and forth. He's sarcastic like myself, and I was like, I got home, I walked in the door, I hit him up, and he said absolutely. And then he took the ball and started rolling with it. And here we are with the debut of the Mind of the Meanie podcast platforms. So the first show went great. We're still working on stuff. We're working to find that formula and comfort zone.
And
And
it takes a while.
it's a work in
That's the
progress.
thing. Yeah, of course. It always is.
It's a
I've
work
been
in
doing this
progress.
11 years. This is my 11th year of podcasting. And I grew up a Howard Stern fan. And that was my dive into radio.
Same.
So, same thing with you,
Same
which
here.
I knew that about you. I from following you on Facebook and social media. Growing up in New York, Howard was what I listened to. And then I got into other things, other radio shows. And I kind of went into the tech side as well. But always my thing was I wanted to do radio. And after Howard left radio, there really wasn't any money in radio, so I went into another sphere of it that has even less money, and that's podcasting. And over 10 years, the market's matured, and knock on wood, we do well. But the great thing about what you're doing with this is that there's no mistakes you could make, right? Other than technically, right? Other than having
Right.
the issues that we had before we were doing this, but nobody's ever going to see that. Nobody will see that. Nobody will hear it, and you'll only do better with that. Your stories and your experience is something that nobody else could possibly tell. You going from, I mean, I'm sure there's similar stories, but your specific story is not one that anybody could tell. And I don't think it's a story that a lot of people have heard. unless you really follow the nitty gritty details of shoot interviews and things like that, which I don't think most wrestling fans do. I think podcasting has really opened up the ability for you to kind of get an insight of what happens really in the business, and someone like you, the process of being in ECW and going to WWE and being all around the independent circuit. Your story is very interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, you never went to WCW, right?
You cut out on that last part there.
You never,
Sorry.
you never went to WCW, right?
I had a chance to go to WCW, and this is both. This was in the time where WCW and ECW were both on the way down. And it was kind of like picking the ticket whether to get on the Hindenburg or the Titanic. So I chose ECW. I was like, if I'm going to go down with the ship, I'll go down with my friends.
Yeah.
So no, I there was talks and all that good stuff, but when I came back to it, I went back to ECW. But to your point of listening to like Howard Stern, I'm a big fan of talk radio in general. When you're on the road, when you're traveling, and a lot of times when you're by yourself, you need something in the car to listen to get your mind off and keep you distracted, to keep you from dozing off behind the wheel. I always like talk radio because even when I'm by myself, I feel like I have somebody with me. Traveling on the road. I don't know if you're familiar, but my tag partner Stevie Richards is definitely familiar with guys like Art Bell
Oh, I
and
know.
stuff like that, where
I'm sure I'm going to
theater
talk
of
to
the
him about
mind.
lizard people.
Whether
Yeah.
you believe it or not, it's great radio, and Art, he
I'm
didn't
just
believe what somebody was saying. He'd let him give him enough rope.
so coincidentally, I have him scheduled because I haven't had Stevie on in about a year now. So it just so happened that we connected. I'm like, you want to do something today because he's not doing anything with Russo today, so or in the afternoon. So I know for a fact I'm gonna have to talk him away from talking about how this is the end of the world and the Illuminati came up with this whole coronavirus situation. But I think that's it.
Yeah.
Again, it's fascinating to hear it, right? I always say I love hearing all those different opinions because it's interesting to me. Not that I specifically believe in it, but I find it fascinating that you can think about this and just how people's thought process works. I'm sure you've heard every single conspiracy on the face of the planet with him.
I was really into conspiracy theories until conspiracy theorists came along and ruined it for me. Uh, there's sometimes something could be happening right now, and there's somebody typing exactly the behind the scenes, and they're booking the angle on the internet before the cops even arrived. So
Yeah.
how does Joe Schmo in whatever area know more before they even set up the crime scene tape? So
Yeah.
I'm into the theater of the mind. I love ghosts. I love UFO stories. I'm into all that. I believe in some of it, and I believe I've seen a UFO at least once in my life.
Listen, I'm in the same boat as you.
But
Same boat.
me and Stevie have a story. If you could get him to talk about it, there's a trip from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. We're coming back from a show for Norm Connors, and we lost like an hour of that trip that neither of us know what the hell happened. We just
So it was from Pittsburgh to Philly. What year was this?
it was probably 96. It was my first year in the business. Oh, well, my first year in ECW, first couple months in ECW. We did a show in Pittsburgh for a wrestler named Lord Zoltan, who runs a good show called, it's a benefit for the School for the Hearing Impaired. And we were coming back from that, and we had already been up 24 hours because Paulie kept us up till 7 a.m. doing promos for ECW. So we're driving back, and then we know 1 minute we're at 1 mile marker, and before you know, we're at another mile marker, and we just pulled over. And we're like, we just looked at each other. What the hell just happened?
And you both had the same experience.
Same thing, same time, and
Wow.
thank God. I mean, neither of us fell asleep, or we would have crashed surely. But me and Stevie have had that experience where we're both, yeah, man, we just like totally lost an hour of our time, and we don't know, we have no clue what happened.
I got to ask
Weird.
about that today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love Stevie too. I'm glad you're having him on.
Yeah, he's actually one of my closest friends in the business, I guess, because it's not nothing that we talk about is about wrestling, which I kind of
Yeah,
like.
Stevie. Well, the good thing about Stevie's a straight shooter. You know where you stand with him, and I'm very fortunate. He took a liking to me and recommended me to Raven, and then Raven recommended me to Paulie and Todd and all that good stuff. Or I'd be sitting here on an empty couch, not doing anything, not being in the business anymore. So I owe a lot to Stevie, and you know I can't say enough good things about the guy. So.
Well, you came up, to kind of backtrack a little bit. You came up in a time where it was a lot of craziness, right, in the business. I mean, ECW. I can't imagine that chant ever going away, which is bizarre to say. It's 20 years since 19 years since ECW ceased to exist technically, right? And I'm not counting WWE's version, but even now the ECW chant happens. People know what it is. I was in Midtown Manhattan. I'm in a suit. I'm in the financial area, and there's a guy with a button down, dressed in a suit. He's taking the shirt off because it was a couple months ago. It was warm out, and he's wearing an ECW shirt underneath his suit. And you think
It's
about
kind of
that,
like Fight Club.
it really is. It really is. Yeah, it's wild to me that it resonated, right? And why do you think it resonated so heavily amongst wrestling fans?
Uh, it I often describe ECW as the Haley's Comet of professional wrestling. It shined really bright and it shined for a little bit of time, and it really had an effect on those who were able to witness it. And it just came along at the right time when wrestling was way too cartoony, and it was just blood and guts. It was like going to a punk rock show, going to kind of going to a Gigi Allen show minus
Yeah,
the other stuff.
yeah, yeah.
But but dude, it was an experience. And I see people now and then who go, oh, it doesn't hold up today. I was like, it holds up. Not only does it hold up, it holds up to the point where people, it's like a family heirloom. There's people who pass it down to their
Yeah.
children pass it down to their children. It's just like that scene in Almost Famous when the older sister passes down her record collection to the younger brother.
Yeah.
This is my ECW for you to watch and to cherish and to take on to future generations. And it's just like the Ramones and anything else that happened really quick, and it still reverberates today.
The whole "it doesn't hold up" thing is interesting because
It's incredible.
it is incredible because it by the standard of what was happening in that time frame, right? Like 96, 97. I think it's a very underrated year for WWE. 97 was a very underrated year. I thought they had tremendous matches that year, and nobody really talks about it, right? Because everybody remembers the Austin era and everything beyond that. But I think 97 was a blockbuster year for them. But for ECW, 96, 97, 98, those were the moments that, I used to watch it on MSG at 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays. I used to stay up to do that. I used to record everything. It doesn't, if we're talking style, yeah, it doesn't hold up by today because nobody does half the stuff that it does. It's its own genre. It's its own thing that was never, that you couldn't replicate. I mean, it was attempted, right? And you work with a couple of promotions that kind of stuck to the model of ECW, and some did very well with it, and some couldn't do it. The genuineness couldn't be created. And the only way that style worked is if it was actually genuine. And, you've worked with a lot of these guys. Do you think that's what made ECW successful versus some other people?
There was definitely a right formula, right place, right time, right building, right set of circumstances with in Philadelphia, our local sports channel, Prism, had just got bought out and became Sports Channel Philadelphia, and they were looking for content. And Todd Gordon just happened to be there at the right place, right time to get ECW on Eastern Championship Wrestling on Sports Channel Philadelphia. And then from there, it just grew and grew. It went from, them having the ring announcer announce, hey, if you want to be on TV, sit in the bleachers,
Yeah.
so the crowd would look full, to a year later they're having the first ever three-way dance and drawing their first legitimate 1,200 ticket sellout. It was like a snowball that rolled downhill and caught momentum. And a lot of people, when you said about the attempts to do reunion shows and stuff like that, a lot of people criticize it. Oh, look at these guys try to live in their former glory and all that stuff. And it wasn't that we were living in our former glory. We genuinely liked to being around each other.
Yeah.
We genuinely loved each other. That locker room, I mean, it was us against the world. If one person did good, we all did good. If everybody did good, then we did great. And there's people I still talk to this day. As a matter of fact, with the Dark Side of the Ring guys, needed, to reach out to Sandman and New Jack. They hit me up, and I helped them, connect those guys to, to further tell the story of ECW on a nationwide scale. So, it was the little injured that could, and I often think, man, imagine if we had social media, the social media we have now with like YouTube and all that stuff back in ECW days. ECW could have easily just put itself on YouTube and hopefully monetize itself that way. Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about paying for TV. You just produce the TV and put it up on YouTube, and sell advertisements and sell your merch and stuff like that. And
well, here's the thing.
When I see the abilities of like a simple indie show could do nowadays compared to what we had to do in ECW just to make it look presentable, it's mind blowing.
It really is. So you brought up the Dark Side of the Ring. I just watched the New Jack one last night. What do you make of the series? Because the Chris Benoit one, I think, was probably so far one of their best. I guess interpretations of what happened, or no matter where you stand on it. I thought it was very emotional. It was raw, which has always lacked with the story of Benoit and what happened and the people that were affected by it. Obviously friends, family, and obviously the Nancy and his son. What did you make of that? Watching that as someone that was in the business around these guys and someone that's a fan.
When it came to the Chris Benoit thing, it just definitely opened up my eyes to a lot of things I didn't even know. When things happen, like I said, conspiracy theorists, people, have their theories and they put it out and they know everything before the cops even show up. But, and I had my theories too. There's nothing wrong with having theories. It's just when the facts come out, then you resort to the facts.
Yeah.
And to watch, the Dark Side of the Ring thing. Now, when I first heard about Chris and his family dying, I automatically thought, oh, it must have been carbon monoxide poisoning or something. Maybe
I was explaining that to my wife because I don't think she remembered. She remembers me talking about it, but I wasn't doing a show or anything where I was covering it. But I was trying to remember because they did that memorial show on Monday. They had already known that they had all passed away. So was that the theory that people had, that it was carbon monoxide poisoning?
That was my. I first heard Chris and his family had passed away maybe roughly 3 in the afternoon on a Monday. I was standing in a Walmart and my buddy texted me. I couldn't believe it. Me and Mrs. Meanie went from shopping in the store to running home, and the internet, internet was the internet back then, but it's not as instant as it is today. So I'm just trying to find out things. I was like, man, I know Chris, I knew Nancy. I didn't know that son, but I knew their other son, David.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I could. If you told me a UFO came to the Earth and murdered that family, I would have believed that before you would have told me Chris murdered his own family.
It's so tragic. I mean, still now talking about it because I kind of fell out of wrestling after that. There was something that, after Eddie and Chris and obviously the plethora of other guys that passed away in a very short period of time, which you were friends with many of them, it hurt watching it for a lot of people. I was probably one of those people, and then I came back later on, but it was almost like I needed a little break from it. I feel like a lot of people felt that way. It had to be tough for everybody that was in the business because he was not one, from all the people that we talked to, he was not one of the guys that people would say, yeah, that would happen.
Right. And it's funny you say that you kind of went away from the business for a little bit after Chris and Eddie died. You reminded me of the story of the Von Erichs, where they were the hottest thing in their territory. They were the hottest thing in Texas, and then David dies, and then Chris dies, and then Kerry dies, and slowly but surely the attendance at world class went down and down because your body can only take so much tragedy and stuff like that. And Eddie's passing was tragic. The death of Chris and Nancy and their son was tragic. So I could see where some people would be shell shocked to the point where, I need to take a breather. I need to take a knee. Have a cup of coffee, and then maybe I'll come back to the wrestling thing. For me, uh, I was shocked and I was numb. But it's just weird. For me, there's been other tragedies before
Yeah.
Chris and Nancy thing. So at one point, do you go from being numb to certain things to just like sometimes you sit here and go, oh, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And it's a shame to have to say that, but but the Chris and Nancy thing really was a gut punch.
Yeah.
Nancy was a sweetheart, uh, and I think, unfortunately, I think she's gotten the Farrah Fawcett deal in this whole treatment and this whole deal. Like when Farrah Fawcett died, everybody's like, "Oh my God, Farrah Fawcett died," and then Michael Jackson died, and
Hmm.
his death overshadowed her. Where I don't think I hope more people start talking about Nancy, and she was a superstar too. She was a person too. She was a victim too, and just the fact that people keep leaving her out and talking about Chris re-victimizes her, and hopefully WWE comes around and puts her in the Hall of Fame because and people go, oh well, you don't want to have to say Nancy Benoit. Don't say Benoit, just say Nancy.
You can say
Just say
woman.
woman. And
Yeah.
people understand. People get it. Enough time has passed to where I think you should allow Nancy to have her moment in the sun, and then have her sister come out and give her credit. And it's time. It's time to let Nancy get some shine.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I want to talk about you a little bit. So when you've been in wrestling for so long, and your character, and obviously the BWO people still buy the merch, and your character is memorable. What was the moment for you? What was the highlight of your career? I mean, spanning 20 years, right? 1994 to uh I mean, you're still not
Wow.
retired. I mean, you're still going. You're still doing stuff. I mean, from '94 to now, what's your highlight? I always like to ask some of the guys that, because sometimes it's very different than what the fans think of their highlight. I forgot who it was. I think it was Chris Masters. We had him on, and I asked him that question, and he said honestly the best match he had was at a house show in some town, and I forgot who he told me he was working with, but that was his moment that he thought was one of his best matches.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of a lot of cool things. From joining ECW, debuting in ECW, having Cactus Jack handpick Stevie and I to be a part of his farewell to ECW, to debut in the BWO, which became one of the top. We wound up having one of the top selling shirt in ECW history, to being a part of first ECW pay per view, and then the story in my life has been a little storybook where I debuted for ECW in my hometown, Philadelphia. I debuted for WWF in my hometown, Philadelphia. And I had my only WrestleMania moment in my hometown of Philadelphia. Yeah. And just to be a part of the Philadelphia scene and stuff like that. But you're thinking about a single moment. It's like trying to pick your best child, and which one of your children you like the most. I got to wrestle in Madison Square Garden. One of my regrets is not getting a chance to wrestle in the Philadelphia Spectrum. There's a lot of things I wish I could have done. A lot of things I'm glad I did. Uh, Probably, I mean, yeah, just working with Tracy Smothers every night. In ECW was a treat and a pleasure. and a learning experience. And then going to work WWE and getting to work with future Hall of Famers like Edge, Christian. Well, they were they weren't Hall of Famers back then, but Edge, Christian, working with the Hardys, working with a guy like Gangrel and everybody. I was very fortunate to be a part of the things I got to be a part of.
A lot of memorable moments.
Yeah. I don't want to paint myself in a corner because I could say one thing today and tomorrow I go, I'll think of something totally, that I forgot about. That's the good thing about talking with fans about wrestling and stuff like that is they remind you of things you may have forgotten about, and that's another thing why I want to do this podcast because there's a lot of things I've forgotten about that I just haven't had a chance to talk about. And then we do a Ask Meanie Anything, and it might trigger a memory. So you ask me a question now, I can give you an answer for today, but tomorrow could be something totally different.
Yeah. No, I get that. So how are you currently? How are you doing the podcast? I always like to know that. Like, how you're doing everything over Skype, and you have a producer put it together. Because I think the show's going to be great. Obviously you have a tremendous amount of stories and experience, but it's not just about pro wrestling, right? It's about whatever's going on.
Yeah, we called it the Mind of the Meanie just because I take great pride in I could talk about anything. And you know what? I really want to talk about everything. I don't want to paint myself into a corner. I mean, you look at the landscape of wrestling podcasts, and there's so many different types. There's people who do Conrad does shows about specific shows or specific wrestlers. Uh, and then there's people who talk do Monday night recaps, and they do pay-per-view recaps and stuff like that. So it's a matter of what do you do that's different. And we're talking about podcasts. I talk about my favorite radio shows, but one of my favorite podcasts right now is Joe Rogan.
Yeah, for many of us,
Joe Rogan, dude, he's got the perfect. I'm envious of like his formula because it's just him and the guy sitting on the microphone. Hey, what's up? And they talk about whatever.
No structure, which is amazing.
No, I'm a big fan of no structure, painting outside the lines a little bit. And there's people who I talked to, to feel out about potentially being a host, and they always said, "What's your formula? What's your platform? What are you going to do?" It's like I just want to do whatever. I just want to, pick up the phone, or we do it on Skype. So I want to pick up the Skype and him go, "Meanie, what's up? Hey, man, the apocalypse. Hey, Ray."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And go into a 40-minute or 30-minute segment about that. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
And then you go into like a 40-minute segment about that. I think that's the amazing thing about structure, about podcasts. You don't have to do commercial breaks. You don't have to think about that. You can just talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I think that's what makes it great.
Right. I like I told my co-host Josh Chernoff on the debut episode. One of my favorite guitar players in the world is Eddie Van Halen. He could do no wrong in my eyes. But he describes his style of playing, especially doing guitar solos. He equates it to falling down the steps, but at the end you land on your feet and you're okay. Mm-hmm. And that's like how I relate to me telling stories, where I might start off on one point, I'll take a side road, I'll dip back into the story. I might stop and have a drink right here, and then I'll get back to the story. And then by the time I end to it, I'll get to the point I was eventually getting into, because so story, I feel like I'm cheating the person I'm telling the story if I don't tell the little details in the backstory into why that thing happened. I can say, oh, this happened because of that, but there's so many different mitigating factors that go into leading up to what's and the whys of something happened. And that's something I really want to get into on Mind of the Meanie, where you could talk to me about a wrestling show and I'll try to paint you a picture of what the sky looked like that day, and what the atmosphere in the building was, and who was what, who was where, and stuff like that. It's theater of the mind. I want to try to bring you into the situation and give you the mindset of myself or whoever I was with, and whether it's wrestling or an event I went to or a concert I went to, just an interaction. I want to talk about anything and everything, and just be entertaining. And I don't, like I said, I don't want to be put in a box for just one category
Yeah, and
because I could literally
that's the
talk
way
about
to do
anything.
it. Yeah, the second you limit yourself, then you start, you know, grasping for straws occasionally because you may not be feeling that conversation at that moment. So you got to make a pivot,
Right.
which is totally fine what we do. Here's a question for you. You're currently following everything that's going on in pro wrestling? You're still very active with watching and keeping up with the trends?
Yeah.
So what do you think
Yeah.
of
And even if
AEW?
I'm sorry.
What do you think of AEW right now?
I think the AEW is fantastic. With anything, they're growing by the episode. They're learning by the episode. You know, had the All In show, the All Out show, their pay-per-views, and now they have TV where they're running once a week, and they're learning on the fly. I mean, and I don't mean to say that in a bad way because guys like Dustin and Jericho, they're WWE tested and ready, so they're bringing their vision to Tony Khan, and Tony Khan is allowing them to have a platform to bring the fans the best wrestling they could bring, and they have a room, great broadcasting team. Everything on that show is top notch. It's
Oh,
just
absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't think anybody thought that you would see wrestling on TNT again. I think that was a big surprise to a lot of people and a lot of naysayers. The whole team thing, like people pick sides. I don't get that. I think if you're a fan of wrestling, you should be happy that there's another place for the guys to get a job and for you to kind of see different style. But we were talking about pivoting with podcasting, right? You said, you kind of don't want to stick to one specific format because you want to be able to kind of go with the flow and see what's on your mind. I think AEW was a great example with these no audience shows, right? Because you saw the difference between production from WWE standpoint of doing a very consistent shot with everything that they do for 20 plus years. This is how they produce content versus AEW that has, less than a year experience with producing this and just trying something different.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. I don't get I kind of get the gang mentality, and when it comes to wrestling, because when ECW was in its heyday, I mean, people would break out in ECW chants at WWE events. So, in some ways, AEW is like the new ECW.
Yeah.
But there's good wrestling all over, and wrestling should be like a buffet. I mean, you might not like the chicken, but you can have the steak, or you can have the this. You got the pasta or something like that. You know, I here's me with another analogy, but wrestling's like pizza. You know, even when it's bad, yeah, it's pizza. When it's good, it's great. When it's bad, it's still pizza.
Yeah.
And I'll just put on wrestling as something in the background. It's like wrestling's a part of me. It's like a comforting thing that I don't have to look at the screen, but I can have it on in the background and pick up on what's going on, like a sixth sense of sorts. But yeah, there's great wrestling in AEW. There's great wrestling in NXT. I
MLW
have
doing some
friends
great
in both.
stuff.
MLW's, yeah,
Yeah.
you know what? MLW doesn't get the love they deserve as well because Court Bauer's doing wonderful things with MLW, and he's growing that business quite well. And they just signed a new deal to do more programming, hopefully across more platforms, whether it's wrestling or podcasts or stuff like that. Court Bauer's doing an amazing job with MLW. There's so much good wrestling on that show. There's so much good wrestling on MLW, NXT, AEW, Impact, which I still call TNA, but oh well. There's and
It's so
if
difficult not
you're
to.
bored with
That's the
that,
problem. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's New Japan. There's everything. There's everything at your fingertips you could want. Instead of hating on, instead of bitching about something you don't like, why don't you glorify the thing you love, stuff like that.
I think for a
So
lot of people,
that's what I
right?
choose to do.
It's I find it because there's no easy comparison you can make for pro wrestling when it comes to any other sport or even television, right? And I always feel like people say, well, I like wrestling. How do you alienate? It's like saying I like dramas, but I only like this drama and I won't watch anything else. And every other show that's a drama in the genre that it's in sucks because this SVU's the best one, or you know what I mean? I don't get the logic when people dislike other wrestling or they don't have the I guess the patience to entertain watching another product. It's not a these I think the whole Monday Night War and the 90s of ECW versus WWE versus WCW, I think that kind of set this bizarre mentality of us versus them. But the reality is guys are going to bounce around. Guys are going to work everywhere. And if you have an option, if AEW puts on a hell of a match and you're a WWE fan or whatever, some New Japan fan, why can't you say, you know what, that was a phenomenal match. They did a great job there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was a perfect analogy with the Monday Night Wars kind of being the catalyst to that. But because before the Monday Night War intro, everybody pretty much, stuck to their ground. They never really went head to head. The closest thing they went to head would be in Philadelphia when NWA would run the Civic Center and WWE would run the Spectrum on the exact same night. And they would do it to kind of see where they stood fan wise to see like who outdrew who and who had a sellout, who didn't have a sellout, and stuff like that. Have AEW versus NXT, and both rosters are loaded. Why can't you like both? And I tell you the truth, I don't watch either show live. I'll record both, and I'll go and watch both, and I'll enjoy both.
That's the beauty of it. You don't have to. You don't have to watch live.
Yeah, that's right. And I can sit there with an open mind and say this was good, that was bad, and I don't have to worry about the ratings or stuff like that. I just worry about the content, and stuff like that. Just like I'm a fan, and that's what I do.
Yeah,
I take off my worker cap and watch it as a fan and enjoy both.
Excellent. I know we're out of time here. We had a little late start. I'd love to have you on again and talk about, pretty much everything, what's going on currently in the business and kind of go back and reminisce about some of the other stuff that you did years ago and currently. And of course, talk about the podcast.
Absolutely.
We'd love to have you on. Let's talk about the podcast a little bit. Where can people find it? Where can people find you and any other upcoming events on the horizon? I know right now nobody's working, but anything coming up?
Yeah. The podcast is my number one thing. Mine and the Meanie. You can find it on most, if not all, podcast formats. And if you can't find us on the one you like, let us know. We're on social media. Mine and the Meanie across everything. Mineandthemeanie.com. It's me and my co-host Josh Sherdnoff, who does a lot of stuff for Fight TV. He does podcasts. He's got his own talk show on there as well. If you want to support the Blue Meanie, I know times are tough and money's hard, but if you have a couple, bucks and you want to buy a Blue Meanie T-shirt, go to prowrestlingtees.com/Blue Meanie. Currently, right now at Collar on Elbow, you go to collarandelbowbrand.com. There's a brand new Collar and Elbow BWO themed shirt that I'm wearing today. Cheap plug. If you use the promo code Meanie, you will save 10% on that. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, Blue Meanie BWO, and I'll be happy to interact with all the great fans out there. And hopefully, I'll give you some entertainment in these tough times with Mine of the Meanie.
Excellent. Meanie, thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, I'd love to have you on again. And that's it for this week, guys. See you next time.